The Piper L4 Grasshopper weighed 765 pounds empty. Its engine produced 65 horsepower. Its wings were made of treated cotton fabric. It flew at 75 miles per hour, which was slower than some cars on the German Autobahn. The Luftwaffe didn't bother shooting at Cubs. Their pilots considered it beneath them, a toy, a camera platform, something for officers to use as a taxi. The German Panther tank weighed 45 tons. Its frontal armor was 4 inches of hardened steel. Its 75mm high-velocity gun could punch through an American Sherman at 1,200 yards. In the autumn of 1944, Panthers were destroying American tank formations across eastern France faster than the Army could replace them. Major Charles Carpenter was a high school history teacher from Illinois who had spent 3 months watching American tank crews burn inside their vehicles while he circled overhead with a radio, calling coordinates to artillery that always arrived too late. He decided to stop watching. What he did next was so reckless that other pilots called it suicide. What it actually was the most effective one-man tank-killing operation of the entire Western Front. Carpenter had been teaching teenagers about battles when Pearl Harbor happened. He enlisted, and by the summer of 1944, he was flying artillery observation missions over France, circling above the fighting in his fragile Grasshopper, spotting enemy positions, calling them in, watching, always watching. The 4th Armored Division lost 48 Sherman tanks in the first 2 days of the German counteroffensive at Ericourt in September 1944. Panthers could penetrate Sherman armor at 1,200 yards. American 75mm guns needed to get within 300 yards for a kill shot. Most Sherman crews never got close enough to fire. They burned before they had a chance. On September 18th, fog rolled in before dawn, and the Germans used it for cover. Carpenter took off at first light, but the ground disappeared beneath white nothing. He circled blind for 90 minutes. By the time the fog lifted, 11 American Shermans were burning in the fields around Les-Ville. He watched crews bail out. One Sherman took a hit to its ammunition storage. The explosion threw the turret 40 feet. Carpenter saw the loader stumble out with his uniform on fire. The man took 5 steps and collapsed. Carpenter could do nothing. Circle, watch, call it in. That was the job. He had been doing that job for 3 months. He was done doing that job. 2 weeks earlier, he had heard about 2 lieutenants, Merrick and Carson, who had mounted bazookas on their L4s and destroyed a pair of German trucks. Carpenter wanted tanks. He found an ordnance technician and a crew chief willing to help. They bolted 3 M9 bazooka launchers to each wing strut, angled upward 20 degrees, with electronic triggers wired to switches in the cockpit, individual fire or full salvo. The crew chief painted a name on the nose, Rosie the Rocketer. Other pilots walked around the aircraft and shook their heads. The launchers created drag. The 18 rockets added weight the Grasshopper was never designed to carry. The overloaded plane was 90 pounds beyond its maximum payload. The bazooka rockets produced 1,200 degrees of exhaust flame on ignition, and the wings were made of fabric. Nobody had tested whether the wings would catch fire. Nobody knew if the plane could pull out of a dive steep enough to aim the angled launchers at a ground target. Nobody knew if a 75-mile-per-hour observation aircraft could survive diving into the anti-aircraft fire that surrounded a Panther tank column. Carpenter climbed in alone on the morning of September 20th and found out. The fog was still heavy when he took off at 0642. He climbed through white nothing and orbited for over 3 hours, waiting. At 0953, the fog began breaking apart. He dropped to 1,000 feet and began searching. At 1107, he found them. 6 Panthers northeast of Ericourt, advancing southwest toward American positions. Armored cars moving with them, infantry following on foot. The Germans were moving casually. No flank security, no scouts. Observation planes were not threats. They had never been threats. Carpenter climbed to 1,200 feet, positioned himself with the sun behind him, and nosed over. The Grasshopper accelerated in the dive, 80 miles per hour. 90. The fabric wings vibrated. The bazooka tubes screamed in the wind. The bazookas were angled upward 20 degrees, which meant to aim them at a tank on the ground. Carpenter had to point the entire aircraft 35 degrees nose down and aim with his whole body. He could see individual Panthers now. Turrets traversing. Commanders standing in hatches. 100 meters. The lead Panther filled his windscreen. He pressed the switch. The M6A3 rocket ignited with a crack that shook the entire airframe. 1,200 degrees of exhaust flame shot backward and missed the fabric wing by inches. The rocket streaked toward the Panther, trailing white smoke. Carpenter did not wait to see the impact. He hauled back on the stick and clawed for altitude. The overloaded plane responded slowly, too slowly. German infantry below opened fire. Rounds snapped past the cockpit. One punched through the fabric on the left wing. Another hit the tail section. He kept climbing. 200 feet. 300. The firing stopped. He looked back. The Panther had stopped moving. Smoke rose from the engine deck. Immobilized, not destroyed, but stopped. The rest of the column had scattered into the tree lines. Infantry were pointing at the sky, at him, at the Cub, with bazookas that had just attacked a Panther tank. He turned northwest toward Lazaville, followed the terrain at 100 feet, using trees and ridges for cover, and landed at 11:58. Ground crew ran to the plane before the propeller stopped turning. They saw the bullet holes. Then they saw the empty bazooka tube. The crew chief climbed onto the wing and looked at where the rocket had fired. The fabric around the launcher was scorched black, but intact. The metal tube had channeled most of the exhaust away from the surface. The design worked. Barely, but it worked. Reloading took 14 minutes. Carpenter took off again at 12:19. The second sortie found 8 Panthers moving south along a tree line east of Bézange-la-Petite. A larger force, probably elements of the 111th Panzer Brigade, attempting to flank American positions. Carpenter radioed coordinates to Combat Command A. Artillery acknowledged, but artillery took time. The Panthers would be gone before rounds landed. He attacked immediately. First pass immobilized the lead tank. But the Germans had learned. When he came around for a second pass, machine guns were already tracking him. Tracers arced past the cockpit. Something hit the engine, cowling with a metallic clang. The Continental engine coughed once, kept running. He fired anyway. Dove, without confirming impact, pulled up through heavier fire than before. The second Panther was burning. Not immobilized. Burning. Flames poured from the turret hatches. Crew bailing out. But Carpenter's tail section had multiple tears in the fabric. One elevator cable was frayed. The rudder responded with noticeable delay. He turned west with 2 Panthers stopped, 10 rockets remaining, and an aircraft that was beginning to come apart around him. He was still 40 minutes from base when the radio changed everything. Combat Command A came through at 13:21. German armor had bypassed forward positions and trapped a 4th Armored Division Waterpoint support crew 3 miles east of Aracourt. 20 men, no heavy weapons, Panther tanks closing on their position. Artillery couldn't reach them without hitting American forces. Air support was engaged elsewhere. The Waterpoint crew was requesting immediate assistance. Any assistance. Carpenter checked his position. 4 miles from the trapped Americans. 6 miles from his airstrip. 10 rockets remaining on a damaged aircraft with a frayed elevator cable, a sluggish rudder, and an engine running hotter than it should. The smart decision was obvious. Return to base, land, assess the damage, reload, return in a working aircraft. But the transmission said Panther tanks were closing on the position. 20 American soldiers had minutes, maybe less. He turned the Grasshopper east and pushed the throttle forward. He spotted the Waterpoint position at 13:34. 5 trucks in a small clearing. American soldiers taking cover behind their vehicles. Then the Panthers, 4 of them, advancing from the northeast, 800 yards from the Americans, and closing. Infantry moving with the tanks. The Germans had already adapted. When Carpenter appeared, all 4 Panthers stopped moving. Infantry scattered into defensive positions. Machine guns traversed skyward. They were waiting for him. They knew the attack pattern now. High dive, single rocket, pull up. They had set up specifically to kill him when he tried it again. He climbed to 1,800 feet. The Panthers resumed advancing. 700 yards, 600. Carpenter had to choose. Attack into guns that were ready for him, or circle uselessly while 20 Americans died. His right hand moved to the firing switches. First dive, 38 degrees nose down. The damaged rudder made the descent unstable. He fought the controls the whole way down. 95 miles per hour. 100. The airframe vibrated badly. German infantry opened fire at 200 meters, far earlier than before. Tracers converged on his flight path. He fired 2 rockets at 150 meters and hauled back on the stick. The frayed elevator cable chose that moment to partially separate. The stick went soft. He pulled harder. The nose came up. Slowly, too slowly, and he was still below 400 feet when he passed directly over the German position. Rifle fire from every direction. The Grasshopper shuddered. Fabric tearing. Metal pinging. Both rockets hit near the lead Panther. Near, not on. The tank kept moving. Carpenter leveled off at 900 feet, engine running rough. Oil temperature in the red. Fuel gauge showing 5.8 gallons. 8 rockets remaining. 3 Panthers still advancing on 20 trapped Americans. The Germans below were no longer just shooting at him. They were coordinating, anticipating, waiting for the dive they knew was coming. He needed a different angle. He dropped to 200 feet, below the lanes where the Germans had positioned their guns. They had set everything skyward, expecting high dives. Carpenter came in from the west at 80 miles per hour, using a tree line for concealment. At 600 yards from the Panthers, he popped up to 300 feet and immediately nosed over into a 40-degree dive, steeper than before, coming from underneath their gun positions rather than above them. The lead Panther was 200 yards from the trapped Americans. Carpenter armed 2 launchers and fired at 130 meters. Both rockets hit, one at the turret ring, one through the thinner top armor of the engine compartment. The Panther stopped. Flames erupted from the engine deck. Crew hatches flew open. German tankers bailed out with their uniforms smoking, destroyed. Not immobilized. Burning. He didn't climb. He stayed at 300 feet and immediately turned for the second Panther. The anti-aircraft positions were aimed at empty sky above him, while he attacked from below their firing lanes. Machine gun fire ripped through his left wing. The fabric separated completely from one strut. The wing held, barely. One rocket missed. The second hit the turret's side armor and detonated the ammunition storage. The turret lifted 6 inches and settled crooked. The Panther burned. 2 destroyed, 2 advancing. The Americans were firing rifles at the remaining tanks. Useless against armor. Desperate. The engine was grinding now, metal on metal. Oil smoke poured from the cowling. He had 1 attack run before the Continental seized completely. Third dive, 1 rocket into the track assembly of the rear Panther. It slewed sideways and stopped. Immobilized, crew still alive, turret still traversing, but not going anywhere. 1 Panther left, 400 yards from 20 American soldiers. 5 rockets remaining. An engine with seconds of life left. The last Panther had pulled behind a slight rise. Only the turret was visible to the soldiers behind the Waterpoint trucks. Its gun was traversing toward the largest vehicle, preparing to fire. A high explosive round at that range would kill everyone in the blast radius. Carpenter's engine seized. The propeller stopped. Complete silence. Just whined through torn fabric wings. Then it caught again, grinding, clattering, dying, but not dead. Not yet. He armed 3 rockets, everything remaining on the right wing. 1 pass. No second chances. He descended to 150 feet and came in from the east, where he could see the Panther's full hull profile. Thinner side armor. The Panther's commander stood in the turret hatch, scanning for threats. He saw the Grasshopper. Too late. Carpenter fired all 3 rockets simultaneously. The launch nearly tore the right wing off. The Grasshopper rolled violently left from the unbalanced recoil. He fought the controls. The wing held. All 3 rockets converged on the Panther within 2 seconds. The Panther's ammunition storage exploded. The entire vehicle lifted off the ground from internal pressure. The turret separated completely. Secondary explosions continued for 15 seconds. Nobody escaped. 4 Panthers. 2 destroyed. 2 immobilized. 20 Americans alive. The Waterpoint crew was already moving, loading trucks, preparing to evacuate while German infantry was still scattered and disorganized. Carpenter turned west. The engine responded to full throttles with sounds no aircraft engine should ever make. Oil covered the windscreen. 2 miles from Lesaville, the engine seized for the last time. The propeller stopped. The Grasshopper became a glider, a very poor glider with torn fabric and a weight distribution never designed for unpowered flight. He could see the runway. He was too low to reach it. There was a plowed field northeast of the strip. Carpenter aimed for it. At 50 feet, he flared the landing. The tail wheel touched first, then the main gear. The soft earth grabbed the wheels. The Grasshopper nosed over, flipped forward, and came to rest inverted. Carpenter hung upside down in his harness. Fuel dripped from the ruptured tank onto his flight suit. The engine was hot enough to ignite gasoline vapor. He had seconds. He released the harness, dropped onto the inverted cockpit roof, kicked the jammed door twice until it broke free, crawled out, rolled clear, got to his feet, and ran 20 yards before his legs gave out. Ground crew reached him 40 seconds later. Fire equipment sprayed foam on Rosie the Rocketer. The fuel didn't ignite. Medical personnel found minor cuts, bruises across his chest from the harness. No broken bones, no burns. 47 combat sorties in a bazooka cub. Never wounded. He accepted a canteen of water, sat in the mud, and waited for someone to tell him when the next replacement aircraft would be ready. September 20th, 1944. 3 sorties, 18 rockets. 4 Panthers stopped, 2 destroyed, 2 immobilized. 20 American soldiers extracted alive. 1 L-4H Grasshopper written off completely. The concept worked. 3 days later, Carpenter had a new Grasshopper. Same modifications. 6 M9 bazookas. Same crew chief. Same name painted on the cowling, Rosie the Rocketer. Between September and December 1944, he flew 63 more bazooka attack missions. Official records credited him with 6 tanks destroyed, 2 Tigers, 4 Panthers or Panzer IVs, plus 17 armored vehicles disabled and dozens of soft-skinned targets. Witness accounts suggested the actual number was possibly 14 tanks, but Carpenter attacked targets miles from American lines and couldn't land to verify kills. The Germans changed their doctrine because of him. Before September, standing orders said to ignore Cubs. Observation planes were not threats. After Carpenter, every ground unit was required to engage any L-4 on site. Infantry carried dedicated anti-aircraft weapons when operating with armor. Panther and Tiger commanders posted dedicated spotters to watch for Cubs with tubes on their wings. They had a name for him, Der Verrückte Major, the Mad Major. Carpenter accepted the name. Said madness was required when fighting tanks that could kill Shermans at 1,200 yards. The Stars and Stripes newspaper interviewed him in October. Asked why he kept going back. Carpenter said the war needed to be fought 60 minutes an hour and 24 hours a day. Attack, attack, attack again. He said it the way a history teacher explains something obvious to a student who should already understand. In early 1945, Carpenter became ill. Doctors diagnosed Hodgkin's disease, lymphoma, terminal. Army physicians gave him 2 years maximum survival time. He was 32 years old. He had survived 110 combat sorties, flying an unarmed fabric plane into anti-aircraft fire, never wounded, never shot down by enemy action. Cancer was going to accomplish what German Panther tanks could not. The Army promoted him to lieutenant colonel and awarded him the Silver Star, the Bronze Star with Oak Leaf Cluster, the Air Medal with Oak Leaf Cluster. The citations mentioned extraordinary heroism and complete disregard for personal safety. They did not mention that he was a history teacher who believed wars should be fought aggressively or not at all. He was discharged in June 1946 and went home to Urbana, Illinois. Back to classrooms, back to teenagers, back to lessons about battles he had lived through. His wife Elda had waited. His daughter Carol was 7 years old. He had 2 years, according to military doctors. 1948 arrived. Carpenter was still alive, still teaching. 1950, still alive. 1955, still alive. The 2-year prognosis became 5 years, then 10, then 15. He taught history at Urbana High School for 20 years after doctors said he would be dead. On March 22, 1966, Charles Carpenter died at age 53. 21 years after diagnosis, 19 years past the predicted survival time. He outlasted the cancer almost as stubbornly as he had attacked German tanks from a fabric-covered observation plane at 100 meters. He is buried at Edgington Cemetery in Illinois. The grave marker lists his rank, Lieutenant Colonel. It does not say Bazooka Charlie. It does not say Rosie the Rocketer. It does not say the Mad Major. Just the name, the dates, and the service. In 2017, aviation historians identified the aircraft Carpenter flew, serial number 433426. In the collection of the Austrian Aviation Museum at Graz Airport. It had been flying with a civilian club in Vienna for decades. Nobody knew its history. Nobody knew it was Rosie the Rocketer. The Collings Foundation purchased it in 2018 and began restoration. The same Grasshopper that destroyed Panther tanks in the autumn of 1944 would fly again. Carpenter's improvised weapon system did not survive the war. The L-4 with bazookas was too vulnerable for sustained operations. Diving a fabric-covered observation plane into concentrated anti-aircraft fire was not a sustainable tactic. And helicopters would eventually replace everything Carpenter had improvised. But for 4 months in 1944, when American tank crews were dying against armor they couldn't match, a history teacher from Illinois flew a 65-horsepower toy plane into the worst fire the German army could bring to bear, over and over again, because somebody had to do something. He just couldn't stop at 2 trucks. If this story stayed with you, subscribe and leave a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from, or whose forgotten story from the war you think deserves to be told next. We read everyone.